trek with Bruce, and I've always just determined that I want to be like guys like Bruce and Grant when I grow up. Well, not Grant, he's a lawyer, sits behind a desk. He gets to pretend to do this. That's kind of what I do. But my goal in life is to have a cow and a tractor. Because I grew up in Sanpete, Utah, where that's what we did, and I've still got that DNA in my blood. You know, about 238 years ago, there were 56 people that changed the world. We've got a few more than 56 here. 56 people met and said, we're going to change the world. And took on the most powerful nation in the world. And they succeeded because of the just nature of the principles that they were pursuing. And you know what those principles were? Think about this for a second. Liberty, property, self-governance. And they said that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That hasn't changed. That's inalienable from our Creator. That hasn't changed. So I want to just go over some of this for just a little bit, right? You've seen this before. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing that people can say, well, that's just fine. Look at that. That's just fine. In a nation founded, again, on principles of equal protection of law, fundamental fairness, and to not discriminate, that's perfectly okay. Now, do you know why they say that? This is the critical question. You got to ask them, well, help me understand why this is okay. And they'll say, well, your land is arid, so the federal government keeps it. That came from a law professor, by the way, and from a political science professor. Your land is arid, so the federal government keeps it. Now, help me understand Alaska, arid. Oregon, arid. Washington, arid. I was just up in Alaska a couple weeks ago. They have 1 million lakes and 700,000 people. And somehow one of the arguments is your land is arid, so the federal government keeps it. Now, how amusing that we haven't even been asking the questions and making people answer so that they tell us. Why the difference? Now, one of the other answers, they say, y'all just gave up your land. In your statehood agreement, it says, forever disclaim all right and title. They don't read the rest of the sentence to you, of course. Because the rest of the sentence says, until title thereto shall have been extinguished. And what they don't tell you is that, guess what? Their statehood agreement says, forever disclaim all right and title. And their statehood agreement says, forever disclaim all right and title. And so does theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and theirs, and you get the picture, right? So they got to either give their land back, or they got to treat us the same. But those are the reasons. And then when you finally push them and say, well, wait a second, the agreements, the statehood agreements, they're the same. How come you're treating us differently? Then they finally get down to the point of they say, well, you all can't govern your land. If you need to be very afraid of yourselves. Because if you could manage your own land, and the people that you elect at the local level were in control of your land, well, you'd ruin it. You know, we might manage the land for maximum combustion like the Forest Service does now. Of course we wouldn't do that, would we? Of course we wouldn't do that. Let me just ask you a couple questions. Over the last 20 or 30 years, would you say that federal control over these lands has increased or decreased? Increased. Is it even close? Not even close. Okay, so with increasing federal control, has access to the public lands gotten better or worse? Worse. Is it even close? So with increasing federal control, what about the health of the public lands? Has it gotten better or worse? You know, on access, I can't hear you. You guys are quiet tonight. We got to get some. Waddy's going to get you going here in just a second. Access. In Utah, they shut down 12,000 roads. We're having to sue over them. They're shutting down trails all over. The forest is in such a state you can't even hike through it anymore. But forest health, right? We're burning 7 million acres a year. Think about this. We're burning 7 million acres a year. We're sending billions of pounds of pollution skyward. We're killing millions of animals, destroying the habitat, and decimating the watershed for decades. Our children may never know what a healthy forest looks like if we don't act. Does it matter if people are going to laugh and say, oh, you silly people think you can be equal? To me, it doesn't matter. Because I want my kids and grandkids to know what a healthy forest looks like. And I want that big sponge that God created that holds the water in the winter so we can use it in the summer to be there when my kids and grandkids need it. Because I don't believe that those that shut down the land and burn up the acres and send the pollution up, and they'd rather have pollution and burn animals and watershed than have jobs in a healthy forest, I don't believe that's environmentalism. I believe that caring for the land and tending to the land is. Now, what about productivity, okay? With increasing federal control over the last 20, 30 years, has productivity on the land gotten better? No. Or worse? Is the status quo acceptable? Of course not. Of course not. For access, for health, and for productivity, we simply have to act. And so that's where we're going. So now here's what we've got to do, all right? We have to, like Chris Stewart, I don't know if he took off already, he probably did. Busy guy, he's got to get moving. They derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Right now is a time for us to hire. We get to hire our representatives in a system. We get to hire them, and we got to find people that have the knowledge and the courage to battle for the only solution big enough. Just quickly, and I'll turn the time over to Waddy here. You know, there came a time when the western states all got together, and they complained to the federal government. They said, you know, you're controlling all of our land, we can't educate our children. You're controlling all this land, we can't grow our economy. And you're controlling all this land, and you're hoarding all the minerals and abundant resources we have in our lands. You guys have any idea what states those were? It was Indiana, and it was Illinois, and it was Missouri, and it was Louisiana, and it was Michigan, and it was Iowa, and it was Louisiana, and Alabama, and Mississippi, and of course it was this great western state clear over here of Florida. True story. True story. From the 1830s to the 1850s, 90% federally controlled for decades. They're not today. Why? Because they refused to take no for an answer. They banded together. They hired leaders with the knowledge and courage to battle for the only solution big enough. Is it impossible? Of course not. It's already been done. Promises are the same. It's the only solution big enough to get to better access, better health, and better productivity. Let me just close with this. 1987. Ronald Reagan, 1987, you remember it, right? The red phone and Cold War. You didn't know what bombs were going to go off or not, right? Pretty tense situation. Ronald Reagan made this statement in 1987. I believe if he were here, he would say the same thing to us today. He said, this is a wonderful time to be alive. We're lucky not to live in pale and timid times. We've been blessed with the opportunity to stand for something. For liberty and freedom and fairness, and I'm going to add property. These are things worth fighting for, worth devoting our lives to. So let us go forth with good cheer and stout hearts, happy warriors, out to seize back a country and a world of freedom. You can get more information at AmericanLandsCouncil.org. You can get all the information we talked about. We've got to know this and share this and get other people going. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Thanks for being here.